Oh no, it's not going on the side. Oh fuck. Oh, cunt of the Lord Jesus. McCartney Embassy. The McCartney Embassy, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, also called the McCartney Mission, was the first British diplomatic mission to China, which took place in 1793. It is named for its leader, George McCartney, Great Britain's first envoy to China. The goals of the mission included the opening of new ports for British trade in China, the establishment of a permanent embassy in Beijing, the cession of a small island for British use along China's coast, and the relaxation of trade restrictions. Oh, fucking Christ. Fucked up on that one. I could do with a fucking drink. The goals of the mission included the opening of new ports for British trade in China, the establishment of a permanent embassy in Beijing, the cession of a small island for British use along China's coast, and the relaxation of trade restrictions on British merchants in Guangzhou, Canton. McCartney's delegation met with the Qianlong Emperor, who rejected all of the British requests. Although the mission failed to achieve its official objectives, it was later noted for the extensive cultural, political and geographical observations its participants recorded in China and brought back to Europe. Lord McCartney's Embassy, 1793. Background: A View of Canton by Jacob van der Schley, 1749. Foreign maritime trade in China was regulated through the Canton system, which emerged gradually through a series of imperial edicts in the 17th and 18th centuries. This system channeled formal trade through the Kohong, a guild of 13 trading companies known in Cantonese as Hong, selected by the imperial government. In 1725, the Yongjing Emperor gave the Kohong legal responsibility over commerce in Guangzhou. By the 18th century, Guangzhou, known as Canton to British merchants at the time, had become the most active port in the China trade, thanks partly to its convenient access to the Pearl River Delta. In 1757, the Qianlong Emperor confined all foreign maritime trade to Guangzhou. Qianlong, who ruled the Qing dynasty at its zenith, was wary of the transformations of Chinese society that might result from unrestricted foreign access. Chinese subjects were not permitted to teach the Chinese language to foreigners, and European traders were forbidden to bring women into China, because they don't want women in China. Do you get it? Don't like the China. By the late 18th century, British traders felt confined by the Canton system, and in an attempt to gain greater trade rights, they lobbied for an embassy to go before the emperor. By the late 18th century, British traders felt confined by the Canton system, and in an attempt to gain greater trade rights, they lobbied for an embassy to go before the emperor and request changes to the current arrangements. The need for an embassy was partly due to the growing trade imbalance between China and Great Britain, driven largely by the British demand for tea, as well as other Chinese products like porcelain and silk. The East India Company, whose trade monopoly in the East encompassed the tea trade, was obliged by the Qing government to pay for Chinese tea with silver. To address the trade deficit, efforts were made to find British products that could be sold to the Chinese. At the time of McCarthy's mission to China, the East India Company was beginning to grow opium in India to sell in China. The company made a concerted effort starting in the 1780s to finance the tea trade with opium. McCarthy, who had served in India as governor of Madras, present-day Chennai, was ambivalent about selling the drug to the Chinese, preferring to substitute rice or any better production in its place. An official embassy would provide an opportunity to produce new British products to the Chinese market, which the East India Company had been criticised for failing to do. In 1787, Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger and East India Company official Henry Dundas dispatched Colonel Charles Cathcart to serve as Britain's first ambassador to China. Cathcart became ill during the voyage, however, and died just before his ship HMS Vestal reached China. After the failure of the Cathcart embassy, Macartney proposed that another attempt be made under his friend Sir George Staunton. Dundas, who became Home Secretary, suggested in 1791 that Macartney himself take up the mission instead. Macartney accepted on the condition that he would be made an Earl and given the authority to choose his companions. Preparations, voyage to China, arrival. I swear it's bloody McCarthy. It's a long time since I've been exposed to this history. Everybody is told, be wary of Wikipedia, and you do have to be a bit wary. Wikipedia is good, but it's also quite bad. Bloody George Macartney, first Earl Macartney. And don't they look pompous? Oh my Christ. Macartney chose George Staunton as his right-hand man, whom he entrusted to continue the mission, should Macartney himself prove unable to do so. Staunton brought along his son Thomas, who served the mission as a page. What a load of shit. John Barrow, later Sir John Barrow, 1st Baronet, served as the embassy's controller. Joining the mission were 2 doctors, Hugh Gillen and William Scott, 2 secretaries, 3 attachés, and a military escort. Artists William Alexander and Thomas Hickey would produce drawings and paintings of the mission's events. A group of scientists also accompanied the embassy, led by James Dinwiddie. The mission brought along 4 Chinese Catholic priests as interpreters. 2 were from the Collegium Sinicum in Naples, where George Staunton had recruited them. They were familiar with Latin but not English. The other 2 were priests returning to China, to whom Staunton offered free passage to Macau. The 100-member delegation also included scholars and valets. Among those who had called for a mission, that sounds as bad as fucking Hong Hu. Among those who had called for a mission to China was Sir Joseph Banks, 1st Baronet, President of the Royal Society. Banks had been a botanist on board HMS Endeavour for the first voyage of Captain James Cook, as well as the driving force behind the 1787 expedition of HMS Bounty to Tahiti. Banks, who had been growing tea plants privately since 1780, had ambitions to gather valuable plants from all over the world to be studied at the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew and the newly established Kolkata Botanical Garden in Bengal. Period. Above all, he wanted to grow tea in Bengal or Assam and address the immense debt of silver caused by the tea trade. At this time, botanists were not yet aware that a variety of tea plant, Camilla Charles's wife, what a mental patient, was already growing natively in Assam, a fact that Robert Bruce was to discover in 1823. Not that Scottish piece of poo. Mother of fuck. Oh, mother of fuck. Banks advised the embassy to gather as many plants as possible. Blah, fucking blah. Henry Dundas, 1st Viscount Melville, and he wrote Moby Dick. Henry Dundas laid out his goals of the mission in Macartney's official instructions. More British subjects had been trading in China than any other Europeans. Despite this, the British had no direct contact with the Emperor, in contrast to the Portuguese, whose Jesuit missionaries retained permanent positions at the imperial court. Macartney was instructed to negotiate a relaxation of the Canton system, such that the British, this is boring and dumb, The instructions from Dundas also stipulated that Macartney should establish trade relations with other nations of the East. To that effect, Macartney was given letters of credence to the Emperor of Japan to be executed after completing his mission to China. The instructions stated that it may be useful for him to visit Japan to establish trade relations, particularly to enable a trade in tea. Despite the misgivings of the East India Company about the potential downsides of the mission, the company was compelled by the government to fund the effort. Dundas and Macartney prioritised national interests over those of the company, which feared the loss of its monopoly position and the possibility that the embassy would strain diplomatic relations instead of improving them. By sending a direct representative of the British Crown, a British politician and later Foreign Secretary Lord Grenville reasoned that the mission would be given greater attention than if it had been sent only in the name of a trading company. One of the goals of the embassy, blah blah, how bloody boring. Voyage to China, blah blah, bloody boring. The delegation departed Portsmouth aboard 3 ships on the 26th of September 1792. The warship HMS Lion, commanded the captain Sir Erasmus Gower, led the mission. The Hindustan, belonging to the East India Company and later purchased by the Royal Navy as HMS Hindustan, was commanded by Captain William Mackintosh. These 2 vessels were accompanied by a brig, the Jackal. A storm soon hit the squadron, forcing it to stop temporarily at Tor Bay. After making repairs, blah blah blah, load of crap. Blah blah blah, load of crap, don't give a shit. Meeting with the Chunlong Emperor, the approach of the Emperor in China to his tent in Tartary to receive the British ambassador by William Alexander, 1793. It was the practice of the Manchu emperors of the Qing dynasty to lead a ritual hunting expedition north of the Great Wall each autumn. During the reign of Chunlong's grandfather, Kang Shi, an imperial city was built near the hunting grounds at Chengde. That's Chengde, I think, to house the emperor and his entourage while he was away from Beijing. It was at Chengde that Qing emperors often greeted foreign dignitaries, particularly inner Asians. Here too, Macartney's embassy was to meet Chunlong on the occasion of the emperor's birthday. Chunlong called off the hunt to return to Chengde for the ceremonies, as he had done previously in 1754 and 1780 for the visits of Amar Sana and the 6th Panchen Lama, respectively, the latter on the occasion of Chunlong's 70th birthday. The Kowtow issue. How long has it been? Fucking Christ. Oh, okay. The Kowtow issue. Even before Macartney's departure from Britain, he and Dundas had anticipated that there might be some disagreement with the Chinese on the details of the ceremonies and rituals to be performed at the meeting between Macartney and the Emperor of China. What bloody hell, where are we? I've lost it. Dundas had instructed Macartney to accept all ceremonials of the court which may not commit the honour of your sovereign or lessen your own dignity, and not to let any trifling punctilio get in the way of the mission. The ritual of the Kowtow, which requires an individual to kneel with both knees on the ground and bow as to touch their forehead to the ground, presented a particular Dalai Lama period. The Kowtow was required not only when meeting the emperor, but also when receiving imperial edicts from his messengers. While Portuguese and Dutch merchants in Canton, now Guangzhou, had acquiesced to the ritual, British subjects who regarded the act as slavish and humiliating generally avoided kowtowing to the emperor's edicts by leaving the room when such messages were received. For Macartney, one sticking point was the relative status of the 2 sovereigns, George III and Chunlong. Macartney believed that Britain was now the most powerful nation on earth. However, as a diplomat, he had decided that whatever ceremony he participated in must present the two monarchs as equals. Throughout his meetings with Chinese officials, Macartney was repeatedly urged to perform the kowtow during his audience with the emperor. In one message to Legate Zhang Gui and Viceroy Liang Kentang during Macartney's stay in Tianjin, Hen Xin had instructed the two men to inform Britain's representative that he would be regarded as a bore and a laughingstock if he did not perform the ritual when the time came. Nevertheless, Macartney submitted to Zhang Gui a written proposal that would satisfy his requirements of equal status. Whatever ceremony he performed, a Chinese official of equal rank would do the same before a portrait of George III. Zhang Gui objected to this proposal on the grounds that this notion of reciprocal equality was incompatible with the Chinese view of the emperor as the Son of Heaven, who had no equal. According to such a view, the British embassy was regarded officially as a tribute mission like any other. Despite Macartney and Staunton's insistence that the items the embassy brought were gifts, Chinese officials saw them as tribute items. Macartney himself was to be seen as only a conveyor of tribute, not a legate of the sovereign, as he had earlier referred to himself to the annoyance of the emperor. Qianlong's compromise on the issue, stated in an edict dated the 8th of September, the day of the embassy's arrival in Chengde, was that Macartney could perform a single prostration in lieu of the 9 typically called for. However, Staunton submitted Macartney's proposal to Hen Xin the day after their arrival, reiterating the British stance on the issue. With no agreement in sight and the ceremony only days away, Qianlong grew increasingly impatient and considered scrapping the meeting altogether. Scrapping the meeting altogether. Finally, it was agreed that Macartney would genuflect before the emperor as he would before his own sovereign, touching one knee to the ground, although without the usual hand-kissing, as it was not customary for anyone to kiss the emperor's hand. The ceremony, how long is it now? Fucking Christ. We go for bloody 20 minutes. The meeting with the Qianlong Emperor took place on the 14th of September. The British set off from their residence at 3 a.m. in the darkness, arriving at the imperial encampment at 4. The ceremony was to be held in the imperial tent, a large yellow yurt which contained the emperor's throne at the centre of a raised platform. Several thousand attendees were present, including other foreign visitors, Viceroy Liang Kentang and the emperor's son, the future Jianqing emperor. The emperor arrived at 7, presiding as Han over the proceedings. Macartney entered the tent along with George and Thomas Staunton and their Chinese interpreter. The others waited outside. Macartney stepped up to the platform first, kneeling once, exchanging gifts with Qianlong and presenting King George III's letter. He was followed by George Staunton and finally Thomas Staunton. As Thomas had studied the Chinese language, the emperor beckoned him to speak a few words. The British were followed by other envoys about whom little is written. A banquet was then held to conclude the day's events. The British were seated on the emperor's left in the most prestigious position. Outcome. The reception, a cartoon by James Gilray of the reception that he expected Lord Macartney to get from the Qianlong Emperor. Our celestial empire possesses all things in prolific abundance and lacks no product within its borders. There is therefore no need to import the manufactures of outside barbarianism in exchange for our own produce. Qianlong Emperor, Second Edict King George III of Great Britain, 1792. Chinese Soldier by William Alexander. Although ultimately unsuccessful in its primary objectives, the circumstances surrounding the mission provided ample opportunity for both British and Chinese parties not to feel totally disgruntled about the compromises and concessions they had made. The failure of the primary objectives was not due to Macartney's refusal to kowtow in the presence of the Qianlong Emperor, as is sometimes believed. It was also not a result of the Chinese reliance on tradition and dictating foreign policy, but rather a result of competing worldviews which were uncomprehending and to some extent incompatible. After the conclusion of the embassy, Qianlong sent a letter to King George III, explaining in greater depth the reasons for his refusal to grant the several requests presented to the Chinese Emperor by Macartney. The request had included a call for the relaxation of the restrictions on trade between Britain and China, the acquisition by Britain of a small, unfortified island near Chusan for the which Chusan? Oh no, I'm confused. Chusan for the residence of British traders, storage of goods and outfitting of ships, and the establishment of a permanent British embassy in Beijing. However, Qianlong's letters continuing reference to all Europeans as barbarians, his assumption of all nations of the earth as being subordinate to China, and his final words commanding King George III to tremblingly obey and show no negligence, used the standard imperial sign-off as the king were a Chinese subject. The Macartney Embassy is historically significant for many reasons, most of them visibly only in retrospect, while to a modern sensibility it marked a missed opportunity by both sides to explore and understand each other's cultures, customs, diplomatic styles, and ambitions. It also prefigured increasing British pressure on China to accommodate its expanding trade and imperial network. The mutual lack of knowledge and understanding on both sides would continue to plague the Qing dynasty, as it encountered increasing foreign pressure and internal unrest during the 19th century. Although the Macartney Embassy returned to London without obtaining any concession from China, the mission could have been termed a success because it Although the Macartney Embassy returned to London without obtaining any concession from China, the mission could have been termed a success because it brought back detailed observations of a great empire. The painter William Alexander accompanied the embassy and published numerous engravings based on his watercolours. Sir George Staunton was charged with producing the official account of the expedition after their return. This multi-volume work was taken chiefly from the papers of Lord Macartney and from the papers of Sir Erasmus Gower, who was commander of the expedition. Sir Joseph Banks was responsible for selecting and arranging engraving of the illustrations in this official record. See also China, United Kingdom relations, foreign relations of Imperial China, Amherst Embassy, Andreas Everardus van Braam Hoogest. Glutteral. There's no glutteral, there's only guttural. It's all in ye tiny white man's mind. And cultural gaslighting. Beautiful shit. So it was the Macartney Embassy. George Macartney. How long has it been? Fuck, 24 minutes. Sweet cunt of the Lord Jesus.